I'm not what you'd call a philosopher. I'm a soldier. Specifically, I'm Fleet Commander Kralvox of the Tarsian Dominion, and I've crushed enough rebellions to know when something doesn't add up. The galaxy has rules. Simple, straightforward rules that even the dumbest Grokian slug beast can understand. The strong lead. The weak follow. End of story. For 12,000 cycles, that's how it's been. The juggernaut hives of Bellatrix claim their council seats through raw power, their exoskeletons capable of withstanding direct plasma fire. The Morkai earned their diplomatic privileges by demonstrating they could tear battleship hulls open with their bare hands. My own people, the Tarsians, we can regenerate limbs in minutes and survive in the vacuum of space for days. That's why we're respected. Every species knows where they stand in the grand hierarchy. The strength summit happens once per cycle, and everyone flexes their evolutionary advantages. New ranks are assigned, treaties are adjusted. Some climb, others fall. That's life. Then the humans showed up. When their ambassador first waddled into the grand conclave, I swear half the chamber burst into laughter. These pink, flabby creatures with their stick-like limbs and complete lack of natural armor. Pathetic. Their physical tests confirmed what we all suspected. Bottom-tier strength, minimal resistance to toxins, no regenerative abilities worth mentioning. By all measurable standards, they should have been assigned custodial duties at best. But here's the weird part. They didn't seem to care. When offered their position at the very back of the council chambers, they just nodded. No protests, no challenges. Their ambassador, Frost was her name, simply said, "The back is perfect, thank you," with this strange little curve of her lips. That should have been our first warning sign. Most new species fight tooth and claw for recognition. They demand combat trials, showcase their strengths, or at minimum, complain bitterly about their rankings. The humans? They set up their little embassy, established trade routes, and seemed content to observe from the shadows. During military strategy sessions, their representatives would offer occasional suggestions, always prefaced with phrases like, "This might be naive, but," or "I'm just thinking out loud here," and we'd all share knowing looks because, what could these fragile creatures possibly know about warfare? Look, I've been around. I've seen civilizations rise and fall. And I know when something isn't right. When a predator acts like prey, there's usually a reason. We should have asked ourselves, who sits at the back of the room by choice? And why? The first formal diplomatic meeting with the humans was, frankly, a joke. We'd set up our intimidation hall, you know the one, with the deliberately oversized chairs for non-Tarsians, the gravity cranked up to uncomfortable levels, temperature fluctuating randomly. Standard protocol to establish dominance. And in walks their delegation, led by Ambassador Frost and her second-in-command, a male called Nakamura. Both barely reaching the shoulder height of a juvenile Tarsian. Their limbs looked like they'd snap in a stiff breeze. No claws, no visible fangs, skin as protective as wet paper. Seriously, you could practically see the fluids pumping through their translucent outer layer. Disgusting, really. "Welcome to the Galactic Conclave," Grand Marshal II's core rumbled, his voice deliberately amplified to rattle their fragile eardrums. "We trust your journey was tolerable?" The humans didn't even flinch. Frost just smiled, that weird mouth-stretching thing they do, and quietly replied, "Quite comfortable. Thank you for asking. We've brought some modest gifts from Earth." Modest was right. Their offerings were laughable. No weapons, no rare minerals, just some plant matter they called coffee beans and thin sheets covered in markings books, they called them. The council chamber practically vibrated with suppressed laughter. During that first week of negotiations, the pattern became clear. The humans would enter rooms last and sit farthest from the center. When powerful species like the Drekar or Volturians would posture and slam appendages on tables, the humans would nod appreciatively. When asked direct questions, they'd often defer, "We're still learning about galactic politics," or "We wouldn't presume to know better than the esteemed council." I remember one particular session on military defense treaties. The Klaxon representative was showing off, as usual, demonstrating how his species could generate bioelectric fields strong enough to short-circuit battle cruisers. And what, he sneered at Nakamura, do humans bring to defend our collective borders? Nakamura shuffled some papers, actual physical papers. Can you believe it? And softly responded, not much at present, I'm afraid. We're quite new to interstellar travel, but we're eager to learn and contribute where we can. The Klaxon literally spat acid in disgust. The room erupted in raucous laughter. Even I chuckled. Such weakness, such submission. Later that cycle, during the annual strength demonstrations, things got even more embarrassing. Each species presents their most powerful warriors in combat simulations. The Juggernaut Hive sent champions who could punch through reinforced durasteel. The Morkai demonstrated their infamous sonic scream that liquefies organs. The humans sent a female called Martinez, who performed a series of coordinated movements she called martial arts. No super strength, no energy projection. Just choreographed dancing? She wasn't even breathing hard afterward. Fascinating cultural exhibition, Arch-Dominator Vex Calyx commented with undisguised mockery. Perhaps next cycle humans can entertain us with more of your performance art. Inez Martinez just bowed respectfully. We would be honored. That evening, at the diplomatic reception, I found myself standing near Ambassador Frost. Feeling somewhat generous after several glasses of fermented Crescent nectar, I decided to offer some advice. Your people should consider genetic enhancements, I said, not unkindly. Most species undergo some modifications when joining the galactic community. You could add dermal plating, at minimum. Frost sipped her drink. That's thoughtful of you, Commander Kralvox. But we prefer to remain as we are. You realize no one respects you, right? The nectar had loosened my mandibles a bit too much. She just gave that strange little smile again. Respect can take many forms, Commander. Sometimes it's better to be underestimated. I dismissed it as the philosophy of the weak. What else could it be? Of course, the galaxy doesn't pause its problems for diplomatic niceties. 3 cycles after the humans joined our little interstellar community, the Draconid Empire decided to make their move. For those lucky enough to have never encountered them, the Draconids are everything you'd expect from a species evolved from apex predators with superiority complexes. Imagine a 9-foot-tall reptilian nightmare with natural armor that can deflect laser fire, regenerative capabilities that make my species look like amateurs, and a charming cultural tradition of eating defeated enemies alive. Starting with the limbs, their first attack came without warning. The Pelaxian mining colony gone. 40,000 souls. The Draconids didn't even bother with demands or ultimatums. They just showed up, slaughtered everyone, and claimed the planet's resources. This is clearly a misunderstanding, droned High Chancellor of the Volturians during the emergency council session. The Draconids are a proud species. Perhaps they felt provoked. Hey, provoked. The next misunderstanding took out 3 Morkai outposts along the Cygnus Arm. The third eliminated an entire Klaxon battle fleet, our strongest ships, crewed by our toughest warriors. Fate vaporized. I led the counteroffensive at Proxima Centauri. We had a coalition fleet, the best ships from 6 species, over 4,000 vessels. The battle lasted approximately 8 hours. We lost 60% of our forces. The Draconids lost maybe 20% of theirs before we retreated. They're simply stronger, Grand Marshal Tuzcord declared in the War Council that followed. Their biological advantages, combined with their technological superiority. Not to mention their battle frenzy, added Arch-Dominator Vex Calyx. When wounded, they don't feel pain, they just get angrier. I noticed the human representative, defense-attached Blackwood, sitting quietly in the back of the chamber, taking notes on one of their primitive data tablets, not offering suggestions. not questioning our tactics, just watching. The Draconids continued their advance. The Grokian colonies fell within weeks. Then the Crescian homeworlds. The Volturians attempted to negotiate and lost 3 star systems for their trouble. They're moving sector by sector, I explained during the increasingly desperate council sessions. Systematic. Thorough. They've taken 16% of known space in just 8 months. We need new weapons, someone suggested. We need better shields, said another. We need a miracle, muttered arch-strategist Laz Korvik of the Juggernaut Hives. The humans remained remarkably calm throughout this apocalypse. While other species panicked, the Pelaxians, even attempting a mass exodus to uncharted space, the humans simply fortified their modest holdings and continued their regular diplomatic routines. Then came the day the Draconids hit planet HX 419, just 3 light-years from Earth. A minor colony world with maybe 1,000 human settlers. The Draconid fleet descended, as they had dozens of times before on other worlds, expecting the usual slaughter. They found the planet evacuated. Not a single human remained. Cowards, sneered Grand Marshal II's Corps when the news reached us. They fled rather than fight. I wasn't so sure. Something about it felt deliberate. The next day, we detected a small human vessel approaching the primary Draconid fleet. A diplomatic shuttle, broadcasting on open channels. "This is Ambassador Frost of Earth," came the transmission. "We request an audience with the Draconid Supreme Commander to discuss terms." The council chamber erupted. "They're surrendering already?" gasped a Volturian representative. Without even a token resistance, a Klaxon diplomat spat acid in disgust. I watched the transmission feeds, a strange feeling crawling up my spine ridges. Ambassador Frost sat calmly in her shuttle, that same placid smile on her face. "The humans are attempting to negotiate with the Draconids," announced High Chancellor They clearly hope to secure favorable terms for themselves while the rest of us fight. "Treachery," shouted someone from the back. Blackwood finally spoke up. "We simply wish to pursue a different approach," he said softly. "With the Council's permission, of course." What could we say? We were losing badly. If the humans wanted to prostrate themselves before the Draconids, perhaps buy themselves a few more cycles as servants rather than meals, who were we to stop them? "Permission granted," said II's Corps with a dismissive wave, "though it will gain you nothing." The humans thanked us politely and continued their approach toward the Draconid fleet. No one expected to see any of them alive again. You know what's worse than watching your galactic civilization crumble? Watching it crumble while a bunch of squishy primates decide they can fix everything with talks. I mean, seriously, talks. With the Draconids. You might as well try to negotiate with a black hole. The official request came during what was supposed to be a strategic planning session. Half the council representatives hadn't even bothered to show up. What was the point? The Draconids had just obliterated the Juggernaut Hive's primary defense station, a fortress previously considered impregnable. Ambassador Frost stood up, wearing one of those colorful fabric wraps humans call suits, and cleared her throat. "Esteemed council members," she began in that soft, measured voice of hers. "The Earth Coalition formally requests permission to open direct negotiations with the Draconid Empire." The chamber fell silent. Then, predictably, erupted in laughter. "Perhaps we misheard," Grand Marshal II's Corps said between guffaws. "You want to talk to them?" Frost didn't laugh along. She didn't even blink. "We believe we may be able to reach an understanding." "The only understanding the Draconids reach," I interjected, "is which parts of you to eat first." This earned appreciative clicks and growls from around the chamber. Frost just nodded, as if I'd made a perfectly reasonable observation. "Nevertheless," she continued, "we request formal sanction to attempt diplomatic contact." Arch-Dominator Vex Calax leaned forward, his ridged spines flaring in amusement. And what exactly do you hope to accomplish, human? Will you bore them into submission with talks about trade agreements? Perhaps offer them some of your coffee beans? More laughter. These meetings had become increasingly bitter as our situation deteriorated. Defense attaché Blackwood stepped forward beside Frost. We recognize the risks, he said, but we've analyzed Draconid communication patterns and believe there may be potential for dialogue. Analyzed their what? I couldn't help myself. Their communication pattern is roar, kill, eat, analysis complete. Perhaps, said Frost with that infuriating little smile, but we'd still like to try. High Chancellor waved a tentacle dismissively. Let them go. What difference does it make? If by some miracle they succeed, we all benefit. When they fail, we've lost nothing of value. The vote was unanimous, though less from hope than from complete resignation. Several representatives didn't even look up from their data screens. As the humans prepared their diplomatic vessel, I found myself following Blackwood down a corridor. This is suicide, I told him bluntly. You understand that, right? The Draconids will tear you apart for sport. He paused, those strange human eyes meeting mine. No vertical pupils, no protective membranes, just soft, vulnerable orbs. Perhaps, he said, but we've faced long odds before. Not like this, I insisted. Look, I've seen them in combat. They don't take prisoners. They don't show mercy. They're the perfect killing machines. Blackwood's expression changed slightly, something humans call a smile, though this one didn't look like Ambassador Frost's diplomatic version. Perfect killing machines, he repeated thoughtfully. Interesting perspective, Commander. As I watched their ship depart the next morning, I wondered what epitaph would be appropriate for a species that lasted less than 4 cycles in galactic society. Here lie the humans. They brought books to a plasma fight. At least they'd die with their strange dignity intact. 3 standard days passed. No word from the human diplomatic vessel. No surprise there. We assumed they'd been vaporized the moment they entered Draconid space. I even drafted a suitably respectful message of condolence to the Earth government. Something appropriately solemn about valiant but futile efforts and regrettable loss. Then the reports started coming in. Draconid communications had gone silent. Not reduced or scrambled, completely silent. Probably preparing for their next major offensive, suggested High Chancellor during our emergency session. Communication blackouts often precede large-scale attacks. That made sense. We braced ourselves, moving what remained of our fleet to defensive positions around key worlds. But the attack never came. 4 days of silence. 5. Then a week. Perhaps they've encountered technical difficulties, someone suggested hopefully. Perhaps they're all taking a synchronized nap, I countered. Nobody laughed. On the 8th day, a lone human ship appeared at the edge of our system. Not their diplomatic vessel, but a small scout craft. It requested immediate clearance to approach the council station. The pilot was a human female named Rivera, not a diplomat or officer, but what they called a combat medic. She carried a small data core. Footage from our mission, she explained as technicians connected it to our systems. Ambassador Frost thought you might want to see this. The council gathered, tense and confused. The feed began. It showed the human diplomatic ship approaching the massive Draconid command vessel, a monstrosity larger than some moons. The Draconids permitted them to dock, probably amused at the prospect of fresh meat walking willingly into their maw. The camera followed Ambassador Frost, Blackwood, and a team of 6 other humans as they were escorted by towering Draconid guards through cavernous corridors. No weapons visible on the humans, no armor. Just their ridiculous suits and small breathing masks. They were led into what was clearly a throne room. The Draconid Supreme Commander, a particularly massive specimen, lounged on a raised dais, surrounded by at least 30 elite guards. So the Supreme Commander growled in passable galactic standard, "The weaklings send weaklings to beg for mercy." His guards made their barking sound that passes for laughter. Ambassador Frost stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Supreme Commander Vorks, thank you for granting us this audience. We come with a proposal." "Proposal?" The massive reptilian leaned forward. "Your proposal is accepted. You will surrender all your worlds immediately, and we might let some of you live as slaves." More barking laughter from the guards. Frost smiled, that same placid smile she always wore in council meetings. "Actually, we have a counteroffer." And then by all the void stars, everything changed. Blackwood tapped something on his wrist. A high-pitched sound emitted from devices the humans must have concealed on their persons. The Draconids roared in pain, clutching at their auditory canals. What happened next occurred so quickly that even the surveillance footage, slowed down to quarter speed, was barely comprehensible. The 8 humans moved, not like diplomats, not like the weak, timid creatures we'd mocked. They moved like nothing I'd ever seen. Ambassador Frost, gentle, soft-spoken Frost, launched herself 15 feet into the air, crossing the distance to the Supreme Commander in a single bound. Before he could react, she had somehow wrapped herself around his massive neck. A small object flashed in her hand. Blackwood and 2 others moved through the elite guards like they weren't even there. No wasted motion, no hesitation, just precise, lethal efficiency. They weren't stronger than the Draconids, not even close, but they didn't need to be. They simply knew exactly where to strike. The remaining humans deployed small devices from their pockets that emitted some kind of gas, and Draconids began dropping to the floor, clutching their throats. In exactly 27 seconds, I timed it during one of my many rewatches, all 30-plus Draconids in the room, including the Supreme Commander, were dead or incapacitated. But the footage didn't end there. It showed the humans moving through the massive command ship, systematically eliminating resistance. Not with superior strength, but with what I can only describe as terrifying precision. They seemed to know exactly where each vital system was located, both on the ship and in Draconid physiology. They planted devices at key junction points. They released targeted bioagents into specific ventilation systems. They uploaded something into the main computer core. Within 3 hours, they had complete control of the command vessel. Within 12 hours, using the command protocols they'd captured, they had paralyzed the entire Draconid fleet. The final scene showed Ambassador Frost, still immaculately dressed despite small spatters of Draconid blood on her sleeve, recording a message to the remaining Draconid commanders. Her voice was exactly the same gentle tone she used in council meetings. "Your empire is now under new management. These are our terms." The council chamber sat in stunned silence as the recording ended. High Chancellor was the first to find his voice. What did we just witness?" Rivera, the human medic, shrugged. "Standard neutralization protocol. The team sends their apologies for the deception, by the way. They felt it would be more effective if the Draconids didn't see us as a threat." "More effective?" I managed to stammer. "You slaughtered their entire command structure." "Well, not the entire structure," Rivera corrected, as casually as if discussing the weather. "We left their regional governors intact, just with new reporting lines. Minimizes chaos during the transition." I stared at her. This creature who looked like she could be snapped in half by a juvenile Tarsian, talking about the systematic dismantling of the most feared military force in the galaxy, as if describing a minor administrative reshuffling. "But you're not strong," someone finally said. Rivera tilted her head. "Strength is relative, isn't it?" The emergency council session that followed lasted for 18 straight hours. Every species sent their highest representatives. Even the reclusive quantum collective materialized avatars, something they do maybe once a century. Ambassador Frost and defense attaché Blackwood sat calmly at the center table, no longer relegated to the back of the room. No one dared suggest it. "Let me get this straight," said Grand Marshal Two's core, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "You knew from the beginning that you could do this?" Frost nodded. "We studied draconid physiology from specimens we encountered at the fringes of our space years ago. We identified 27 critical vulnerabilities before we ever joined the Council." "But your physical tests," I interjected. "Your strength evaluations, endurance metrics, they were all mediocre at best." Blackwood smiled. Actually smiled. "Commander Kralvox, with respect, you were measuring the wrong things." A data projection appeared above the table. Human historical records. Battlefield imagery from their homeworld. Small groups of humans taking down creatures 5 times their size. Tactical operations that seemed impossible given their physical limitations. "Humans evolved as persistent predators," Frost explained. "We're not the strongest, fastest, or most physically imposing species on our planet. So we became something else entirely. We became problem solvers," continued Blackwood. "Strategic thinkers. We studied our prey, identified weaknesses, and developed tools to exploit them." The projection showed humans hunting massive beasts on their homeworld, not with natural weapons like claws or fangs, but with crafted implements, working in coordinated teams, setting traps. "Our ancestors could chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion," Frost said. "Not because we were faster, but because we simply wouldn't stop, ever." I felt a chill run up my spine ridges. "Then why the charade?" demanded Arch-Dominator Vex Calyx. "Why pretend to be weak for so long?" Frost and Blackwood exchanged glances. "We weren't pretending to be weak," Frost replied quietly. "We were being polite." The chamber erupted in confused murmuring. "Polite?" High Chancellor Oom's voice rose above the din. "You decimated the most powerful military force in the galaxy in less than a day." "Yes," said Blackwood, "and we could have done the same to any of you." The silence that followed was deafening. "When we discovered the galactic community," Frost continued, her voice still gentle, "we realized you all operated on a hierarchy of physical strength. We could have demonstrated our alternative capabilities immediately. But that seemed unnecessarily confrontational. So you sat in the back," I said slowly, understanding finally dawning. "You stayed quiet. You watched. You learned." Blackwood nodded. "It's what we do. Adaptation is our specialty." "And the Draconids?" asked a Morkai representative. "They threatened our allies," said Frost simply. "That couldn't be tolerated." I laughed, then a sharp, nervous sound that startled even me. "Allies? You considered us allies? We mocked you, relegated you to the lowest status." Frost's expression softened. "Commander, where we come from, the most dangerous predators rarely announce themselves. They don't need to." The implications settled over the chamber like a heavy fog. "So what happens now?" someone finally asked. "Now?" Frost smiled her placid smile. "Now we continue as before. Trade, cultural exchange, peaceful coexistence. Just with a better understanding of one another." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all those council meetings, those humans sitting quietly in the back, watching, learning, never protesting, never demanding recognition. Because they didn't need to. The galaxy changed after what's now called the Draconid incident. Not overnight, political systems rarely do, but steadily and irreversibly. Within a cycle, the Strength Summit protocols were revised. Physical demonstrations remained, but new categories were added. Strategic thinking, adaptability, innovation, problem solving. The humans still scored mediocre on traditional physical metrics. And somehow they always manage to absolutely dominate every other category. When offered a seat at the head of the council table, a position previously held by the Juggernaut Hive's Ambassador Frost politely declined. "We're quite comfortable in the back," she said with that infuriating smile. "Old habits." Here's the thing about apex predators that I never understood until now. The truly dangerous ones don't waste energy proving their status. On Earth, they call it the lion doesn't need to roar to prove it's a lion. The humans had been telling us what they were all along. We just didn't have the right translation. I see them differently in council meetings now. Those unassuming figures in the back, quietly taking notes, occasionally offering suggestions that are immediately adopted. The way they listen intently while stronger species posture and bellow. The way they smile. Yesterday, say, Mantu, a newly admitted species, some silicon-based life forms with impressive density and resistance to extreme temperatures, loudly complained about their council seating assignment. "We demand recognition of our superior physical attributes." Their representative thundered, pounding the table hard enough to crack it. I noticed a junior human diplomat in the back corner, catching my eye. She gave me the smallest wink. I couldn't help laughing. Perhaps I suggested to the newcomers, "You should be grateful for your position at the front of the room." They didn't understand, of course. How could they? The most important lesson I've learned in my long military career came far too late. Never trust the quiet ones. If something chooses to sit in the back of the room when it could easily take the front, be very, very afraid. Because it's not hiding. It's hunting.